from the Conservative Party. He has apologised. He says he's seeking professional medical support and has denied misconduct. Now, Downing Street initially said that Boris Johnson was not aware of any specific allegations against Mr Pincher when he appointed him Deputy Chief Whip. Well, the picture has completely changed. As you can see from this BBC Story headline, Boris Johnson was made aware of formal Chris Pincher complaint. Well, let's talk to the author of that story, our political correspondent Ione Wells. Ione, tell us exactly, how has the picture changed?
Well, it's changed massively, Joe, as you say. Last night we revealed that a formal complaint was made about Chris Pincher when he was a Foreign Office Minister in 2019 and that a formal process was followed, led by Cabinet Office officials into his behaviour. And crucially, while the investigation was led by officials, both the Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the then Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab were made aware of this complaint at the time. Now, the complaint ended up in a report confirming his misconduct, and I understand Mr Pincher apologised to those involved at the time for his conduct. Now, why this is really significant, as you say, is the fact that just on Friday, Downing Street was essentially saying the Prime Minister was not aware of any specific past allegations about Mr Pincher's behaviour. They wheeled out some of their own ministers to say exactly that on record. Now, fast forward just a couple of days, Number 10 then said yesterday that actually the Prime Minister had been aware of some allegations, but these were reports and allegations that were either resolved or had not led to a formal complaint. Now, in this case, this Foreign Office complaint case, we know that a formal complaint was made. We know a process was followed. So Number 10 seemed to be hinging on this word resolved. But, you know, this is an interesting sort of line from them, because clearly resolved does not necessarily mean that somebody was cleared. And in this case, we know, in fact, that he accepted the findings of that report.
Ione, there's been a significant intervention today by the former Permanent Secretary at the Foreign Office, Lord MacDonald. Tell us about that. We can show also the letter that he's penned.
That's right. This is a really significant intervention. Very uncommon for a sort of former top civil servant to make such a kind of damning public statement like this about members of government. But this was Lord MacDonald, who was formerly head of the diplomatic service, writing to the Standards Commissioner, essentially accusing Number 10 of not telling the truth about this. Now, there's a number of claims that he sets out in his letter. He says that the Prime Minister was personally briefed not only about that investigation that took place in the Foreign Office into this complaint, but also about the outcome of that complaint. And Lord MacDonald has also raised concerns and kind of grievances with Number 10's use of that word resolved, because he says resolve doesn't mean that Chris Pincher was exonerated and this wasn't a sort of happy ending to the situation. In fact, the opposite. So a pretty damning letter there from Lord MacDonald today. And I think this intervention has sort of certainly added to that feeling of upset among some backbench MPs, but also some ministers as well, who feel like they've been sort of marched up a hill only to be marched back down again. Now, the only response we've had in addition today from the government is from the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, who admits that he and Lord MacDonald spoke to Mr Pincher when he was in the Foreign Office about his conduct. So again, admitting that this process took place, he says it didn't escalate to any sort of formal disciplinary action. But as I say before, that doesn't necessarily mean anything about him being cleared, because if anything, we know that the opposite happened, that he accepted the findings of this report. So I think still big questions outstanding for the Prime Minister as we speak about why he then went on to appoint him to this Deputy Chief Whip role just earlier this year as part of that supposed shake-up to Number 10 when he knew about these allegations that were ongoing, particularly as that role is not only responsible for party discipline, but also the welfare of other MPs.
Indeed. BBC political correspondent Ione Wells, thank you very much. Well, let's have a listen to some of what Lord MacDonald said on BBC Radio 4's Today programme.